Mob violence. The next Friday, right after classes, I was sitting in detention once again. It was Miss Nomad's turn to play zookeeper, but she wasn't paying much attention to us. Her desk was covered with leaning towers of papers and file folders. She was busy cleaning out one of her desk drawers when she knocked over a file folder, spilling a stack of papers. I got it, I said. Thank you, Martin. She smiled at me and then went back to sorting through the drawer. I guess I still felt sort of bad about some things that I'd said to her. Maybe I could say something nice about one of her poems. I walked over to the front of her desk and started gathering up the papers, but it wasn't a pile of poems. The folder was labeled Alternative Education Committee. When I saw that the sheet on top was a memo from Principal Davis, I couldn't help reading it. I skimmed the memo and then the next piece of paper. It was a copy of a letter from the State Board of Education. There was a bunch of other stuff, memos, letters, even some copies of newspaper articles. I didn't look at all of it, but I saw enough to know that was what was going on. After detention, I rushed upstairs. I reached the room at the same time as Cheater. Wait till you hear my news, he said. I've got news too, I told him. What is it? Torchy asked. The state might close this place, I explained. They're having this big inspection at the end of the year. Why would they close Edgeview? Torchy asked. I guess some people don't think that the school is doing any good. It felt strange to realize that there were people arguing over what was best for me, people who had never met me, people who had never bothered to ask my opinion. Well, it isn't, is it? Lucky said. I don't know. I wasn't sure. Not that it mattered what I thought. There wasn't anything any of us could do. We didn't have that sort of power. Adults were going to make the decision, and June was far away. What's your news? I asked Cheater. Check this out, he said, pulling a piece of crumpled paper from his pocket. It was in yesterday's newspaper. Pinball tournament, I said, reading the ad. Hey, it's tonight at 9. So what? Trash asked. They won't let us go. He looked around the room at us. Hey, what are you all grinning about? Oh, you'll see, I told him. I just hope you aren't afraid of high places. It was time for a road trip. And so we added Trash to our Friday night gang and headed off that evening for Mondo Video, our pockets filled with quarters that Lucky had in his endless supply. The Edgies never had a chance. I thought for sure that Flinch would win the tournament. I hadn't counted on Trash's telekinesis. He kept giving the ball a little nudge here and there, just enough to keep it in play and make it hit the highest scoring targets and bumpers. In the end, Trash took first place, Flinch took second, and I took third. I figured my third place was just as good as first, since I was the only player without any special advantages. We got little plastic trophies and some angry looks from the Edgies. I didn't think that it would go any further than that, but they were waiting for us outside of the arcade, 10 or 12 of them. Get out of here, the Edgy at the front of the pack said. He looked like he was at least 16. He was wearing a varsity jacket, the kind that you get when you play sports, with a big E for Edgeview High in front that had a picture of a football in the middle of the letter. He was the biggest one in the crowd. We're going, I said. I started to cross the street. Yeah, Flinch said. No reason to stay. We got our trophies. The guy with the varsity jacket swore and said, Don't come back. The others followed me across the street and we headed towards the school. As we reached the wooded hill that led to the pipe, Cheater said, Uh-oh. What's wrong? I asked. Is anyone in here thinking about kicking the crap out of me? He asked. Not me, I said. Me neither, said Lucky. Maybe tomorrow, Flinch told him, but not at the moment. I sure ain't, Torchy said. I had a sudden bad feeling. Do you only pick up stuff from people real close by? I asked Cheater. Well, as far as I know, he said. What if a bunch of people had the same thought? You think it might carry further? As I said this, I looked behind us. Half a block away, we were being stalked by a mob of Edgies. Should we make a run for it? Cheater asked, glancing towards the woods. That didn't sound like a bad idea to me. At the end of the pipe was masked by bushes. If we headed right into the woods, we could be out of sight before the Edgies caught up. On the other hand, I hated to run away. I waited to see what the others did. I don't know about you guys, Lucky said, but I'm tired of everyone treating me like garbage. He stopped walking and turned to face the Edgies. Nobody's pushing me around. Yeah, no more, Flinch said. He stopped walking too. No more, Cheater said. Torchy nodded. He moved next to Cheater. So did I. The varsity jacket guy stepped out from the mob as the rest of them stopped about 10 feet from us. I don't want to see you around here again. Got it? Lucky moved towards him. Then keep your eyes closed, jerk. Varsity swore again and pushed Lucky with both hands. Lucky staggered 2 steps away and then lunged forward and returned the shove. Varsity went back, hard. He plowed into the edgies behind him, and then a couple of them went down. I would have been amazed at Lucky's strength if I hadn't been standing next to Trash. His grunt told me what had really happened, that he'd given Varsity a little extra push. A couple of the edgies slipped towards the back of the mob. We were still outnumbered, but the odds were getting better. "You asked for it," Varsity said as he scrambled to his feet. He pulled off his jacket and threw it to the ground. It landed where I could read the name written across the back. Walden. I guess that was his last name. "Kick his butt, Walden," a kid in the mob said. "Yeah, stomp on his face," another kid shouted. I still didn't like the odds. If Lucky won, the rest of the kids might jump him. If he lost, they'd probably jump us. If we ran, they were close enough to catch us. It was time for a show of force. As they told us in school, act like a criminal and people will treat you like one. I stepped up next to Lucky and spat out the first lie that came to my mind. "Hey, I'm already doing time for assault. What's a few more years?" I figured with our reputation, they might think I was really dangerous. I did my best to look mean. "Gonna have your hands full," Flinch said, stepping next to me, and he leaned forward, putting his face close to Walden. "But I don't think I have anything to worry about. You probably punch like a little old lady." He turned his head away from Walden and grinned at us. Walden threw a sucker punch, trying to hit Flinch when he wasn't looking. Needless to say, Flinch's head was nowhere near Walden's fist. "You missed, Granny," Flinch said as Walden spun halfway around in his attempt to smash what wasn't there. Torchy headed for the woods. Oh man, if he ran, we were doomed. Any sign of weakness in the mob would rush us. I was about to call after him when he returned, clutching a thick stick. He stepped next to Flinch, holding the stick at both ends. I could see a glowing spot in the center on the side nearest Flinch. I had no idea what he planned to do with a burning stick. He turned to his right and nodded to Cheater. "What's he doing?" I whispered to Lucky. Lucky shrugged. Walden looked over his shoulder. His buddies were all hanging back. "Come on," he urged. "Let's kick some butt." None of them moved. Cheater stepped next to Torchy. He threw up his hands like a karate master. I thought he was going to chop the stick, splitting it with his hand, but he didn't do that. Instead, he paused, glanced at Trash, and then at Torchy, and pointed up in the air over Torchy's head. Trash smiled and nodded. Torchy raised the stick, holding it high over his head, still grasping it with one hand at each end. Cheater crouched, then leaped. Trash grunted again, pushing Cheater higher in the air. As Cheater flew up, he shouted, "Hi-ya!" and snapped out a kick. The stick split with a sharp crack, breaking right where Torchy had burned it. As the pieces twirled through the air, 2 of the kids in the mob ran away. Trash leaped forward, slashing out with the edge of his right hand. He hit one of the pieces as it fell. The piece flew like it had been blasted from a cannon. It shot across the street in a high arc, sailing over the cars that were parked along the other side of the road. The night fell dead quiet as everyone watched. Nobody moved or breathed until the stick crashed through the front window of a house across the street. The sound of breaking glass is one of the few things on earth that can send any kid scurrying. The edgies took off. Walden was right there with them. He didn't even stop to grab his jacket. Between the performance that we'd put on and the fear of getting blamed for the window, I guess they decided it was a good idea to leave the scene. So did we. As the porch light went on in the house across the street, we raced into the woods and headed to the pipe. "We were awesome," Flinch said. "What a team." "That was so cool," Torchy said. "I knew Cheater would figure out what I was thinking about chopping the stick, but I never would have thought up the kick part. That was so great." "Yeah, nice move with the stick," Lucky said. "You too, Trash." "Nice and stupid," Trash said. "I almost broke my hand when I hit it, but it was worth it to see their faces." "Yeah," I said. "I don't think we're going to have any more trouble from edgies." We pushed aside the manhole cover and climbed up to the schoolyard. I never thought I'd view it as a safe harbor. At the moment, I was glad to be back. Between our victory over the edgies and our smashing success at pinball, we were one happy crowd as we went towards the back wall. "Me first," Cheater said, rushing to the ladder. "Shh," I warned. "Someone will hear us." "Oh, who cares?" Torchy asked. "We're the champs." "Champs!" Lucky shouted. "Altars forever!" I yelled. As we all rushed at the ladder and started wrestling, getting wet and white and half frozen in the remaining snow. We ended up in a laughing, hitting tangle with nobody trying seriously to go back up to Lucky's room. Finally, we all collapsed on the ground. Oh, we'd better get inside, I said when I caught my breath. Winners first, Flinch said, pointing to Trash. Trash shook his head. Oh, no, that's okay. You take the lead, my man. Flinch smiled, got up from the ground, and shoved his trophy under his belt and grabbed the ladder. He was more than halfway up the side of the building when he froze. An instant later, I froze too as I saw a head pop out from Lucky's window, high above us. Well, look what we have here, Bloodbath said, his grin gleaming in the moonlight like a dagger of ice. All right, here we have some newspaper ads in Mr. Langhorne's desk drawer. Memory problems? We can help. Does your work require you to remember lots of facts or figures? Having trouble? Stop worrying. We have special programs to improve your memory. Redland Phobia Clinic. We specialize in fear of flying. Let us help you conquer your problems. Don't let your fears keep you from experiencing the joys of travel. Call today for an appointment.